Right, so you have to present it as an ordinance.
And that's because we discovered problems, not just in this section, we discovered problems in all kinds of parts
If
of it.
you're rewriting the whole thing, you're
That's what
gonna
we're doing.
present the whole thing.
And I have to say,
Right.
yeah, in regard to one part of it, there are problems with the wind ordinance. And I will tell you right now, half the problems with the wind ordinance, and I was part of it, probably as much as anyone, are because we actually tried to, how can I put it, cater to as much as possible address every issue that the people who were against wind farms brought up. And in so doing, we created a monster because we created parts that were impossible simply because we were trying to satisfy a group that will not be satisfied. I'll put it that bluntly.
I found what I was looking for.
Oh, good.
I have to do this because I'm tired of hearing about, when we adopted the comprehensive plan, these were on the select board: Brian Melvin, Ed Beauchamp, Jerry Freeman, David Stearns, John Center. On the planning board, Gerald Foster, David Bryant, Bob DeShane. Now, if you think those people sat by and let us do something really weird with that comp plan, that's who
That's the
was,
list.
that's who, we had joint meetings and everybody did it together, including Rick. We didn't do it in the
Oh,
middle
yeah.
of the night in some cave somewhere.
Yeah, I remember these people.
You know, if you think that Jerry Freeman and Bob DeShane sat back and let us run the show, you didn't know nothing.
That wasn't the implication. It's just that the staff moved in and out fairly regularly over time. This took a long time to get it done, and it's hard to maintain the public interest. And then it got voted in by a small group at a public meeting, I think was the end result. And they didn't have a big meeting for a big support, which is unfortunate.
Paul, can I say one thing?
Yeah,
This planning board right now has been the longest established planning board, any board in this town that's stayed together as long as it has.
and you
God
know,
bless us.
Gerald, your sketch of how you would zone the town, it's over there in the file cabinet still, if you ever want to refresh your memory.
Yes, but the thing is like everything changes all the time. Nothing stays the same.
And I think that was the point of the comp plan.
Right, which we all agree needs to get back on track. We all agree with that. I don't think you can find anybody in town that disagrees with you, Paula. Jessica, you want to chat now?
I just have some questions.
Sure.
No, I asked.
Okay,
I have a list of The proposed land use ordinance revision for industrial wind provides a 1,500 setback from a home or sensitive receptor on a participating or project parcel. However, the proposed land use ordinance would only require 455 tall wind turbine to be 910 from an abutting non-participating property line, 200% or 2 times the tower height. It would seem that these requirements illustrate how a developer's rights override an abutting property owner's rights by limiting the freedoms of an abutting landowner to develop or otherwise enjoy the property they own and pay taxes on. Can you explain the planning board's rationale behind this discrepancy? George Horton wrote in his findings regarding Bedford versus Clifton, it must be said that isocontour maps are much more than a technical submittal requirement of the land use ordinance. The isocontour maps serve a unique and specific purpose. Isocontour maps depict pre-construction background sound levels is no de minimis.
Not de minimis.
Thank you. Technical submittal requirement, but instead an essential to enabling the planning board to fulfill its responsibility of determining whether the proposed project will comply with the sound limits of the Clifton land use ordinance beyond 4,000 feet from any turbine. How does this revised land use ordinance determine pre-construction ambient sound values at an infinite number of locations not previously measured without these pre-construction isocontour maps? Judge Horton continues, at oral arguments, Pisgah's representative appeared to concede that if higher ground absorption factors associated with the terrain around the proposed facility were used, the results would not comply with the Clifton Land Use Ordinance low-frequency sound standards. This point actually reinforced the importance of ISO contour maps. In the court's view, the worst-case scenario presented by Pisgah seemingly accepted by the Clifton Planning Board is actually a best-case scenario. Do the proposed revisions to the Clifton Land Use Ordinance consider the unique topography and geology of Clifton in relation to ground absorption factors and the effects to low-frequency sound transmission? In Judge Horton's own words, notwithstanding the Planning Board's evident willingness to overlook, excuse, and/or waive shortcomings in Pisgah's application, is the Planning Board satisfied that the proposed revisions to the Clifton Land Use Ordinance is crafted such that future planning boards will not be put in a position to overlook, excuse, or waive requirements such as such actions could cause future litigation? Was woodchuck taken off the list of scenic resources because the planning board would like a wind farm on woodchuck? If the planning board writes Paul Fuller's request for changes to the land use ordinance to be retroactive, what is the exact date these changes would be retroactive to? If the planning board is not going to take the time to discuss quarries, elderly housing, or dance halls before the vote in June, is the planning board only pushing for this new land use ordinance for the wind turbine facility changes? If it is not just for the wind turbine facility changes, why doesn't the planning board wait until the land use ordinance is finished?
All right, thanks, Jessica. Those were good questions. So, Jessica spoke. Paul spoke. John, you want to chat?
Yeah, I'll just speak briefly if that's okay with the board.
Sure.
In traditional sin, that's not videotape. This is the first time I'm back before this board just to listen to the good conversation, but I have been monitoring all the hard work you've been doing. I really just want to say thank you. I know for being a volunteer board, and I'm sure the countless hours you put in, it's a monumental effort. The thing I want to emphasize, and which I think is very important that the board is doing, is in addition to having a very open and transparent process and gathering public comment, I think it's very important that the board continue to consult with its independent sound consultant on the wind energy aspects. And not to diminish at all anyone's intelligence on the subject matter, it just happens to be a very highly technical, complex subject that you really requires, in my opinion, someone who is schooled and has the requisite skills and experience in that particular area. So we haven't looked at the recent correspondence from Mr. Hessler, but we intend to, and we may have comments to provide based on that. But I think the board has made, and the town has made a great choice in having an independent sound consultant in this round and helping it analyze what are the most appropriate changes to make to the ordinance that are really based on science. It's not based on someone's blog, it's not based on someone's, whether they're pro-wind or anti-wind, really has some logical basis on the science behind it. And we just encourage you to continue on that path, and that's all I have to say for the moment.
Thanks. Good that you brought up the technical thing. I wrote it on the website. I just want to emphasize it. Clearly, on both sides of the issue, there's people who are just outliers who just write stuff because they just have an opinion or whatever. Okay, and they're kind of separate that out from those people. But then, as you kind of get more closer to the middle of people, there are quite a few people, and we have to acknowledge this. There's quite a few very smart people. And I did a few weeks ago, Paula. That guy from the, the scientific words for ears are at the moment.
Acoustic.
Excuse me?
Acoustic.
Not acoustic, the...
Audiology.
Audiology.
well, it wasn't audiology, it was even another word. Anyway, that gentleman, ocular, never mind. I can't.
Oto.
Excuse me?
It's otology.
Otology, that's what I was thinking of. Okay,
Yeah.
there was an otologist from the American Otology Institute or somebody like that or whatever, and he wasn't writing on behalf of the institute, he was writing on behalf of himself. And he had written an article indicating that he felt that there were some, legitimate concerns about a variety of different frequencies of the sound in wind turbines. And there are many other, fairly intelligent people, engineers and physicians alike, who have written that there are potentially some problems. But what is difficult, from the planning board perspective, and sort of like, I guess, the missing link, for the most part, the major societies and the major government entities, who are the protectors of public health and the ones who are all, I guess, peer-reviewed, the peer-reviewed literature, like for example, the Australian Medical Association, they're indicating that there's no foundation for some of these problems. So while you do find individual physicians, who obviously they're not stupid, or you can't be a doctor and be that bad. You might lack some common sense sometimes, because we've always seen doctors like that, but nevertheless, they're clearly intelligent people, and they write that there's potentially problems. So you can't just say that you can't just swipe it out. But if you compare individuals who have an opinion, about a particular thing, versus, entire organizations who say, and even NIH, talks about it not really being a big deal, okay? I mean, as far as some of these low frequency sounds, it's difficult if you're on the board side of this equation to accept individuals versus, large agencies and peer-reviewed organizations. I mean, that's where our issue is. Go ahead, Travis.
I admit that it is hard to accept an individual versus an organization, but I think most of us have seen and heard over our lifetimes things about power lines, and the individuals came up originally and said things and people did not, and the big organizations did not agree, and over time things change and they say, well gosh, power line emissions do affect such and such. So even organizations which we trust will recant and change as new information comes to light. So it is very hard to decide. I'm just making the point that we really need to openly realize that we can't just trust just because it's an organization.
Right, but it's hard to find where the line is.
I agree.
And I feel like, from our side of the equation up here, every time, we bring up an organizational study, we get taken to task for accepting the organizational study, over an individual provider or engineer study. But still, as more of these wind projects get built around the world, it seems like there's actually more evidence, almost monthly, indicating that there's not a problem than there was that there's a problem. I think if I could take a snapshot in 2009, I could find probably more literature saying that there's a problem. If I took a snapshot today, I could find more literature saying there's not a problem. And I think that you could say that it's causal, that in 2009 people were concerned about it, and clearly if you're building wind turbines and you're in that particular industry, you're thinking to yourself, if I don't solve this problem, okay, by A, making my stuff quieter, and B, by getting this problem worked out, I'm not going to make any money. So there's definitely, you can easily follow the money. But if you were growing carrots, okay, and people were getting sick from your carrots, all right, I would say that you probably would say to yourself, I think I better figure out why my carrots are making somebody sick. Yeah. And you're going to figure out, because if I don't stop making my carrots, don't stop making people sick, nobody's going to buy my carrots. So then you're going to figure out why your carrots have a problem. You're going to fix your carrots problem. Then you're going to talk about how you fixed your carrots problem, and you're going to sell more carrots, hopefully, because, but I don't think it's any more...
Depending on the consequences of what happens to your carrots. If you kill children because they eat E. coli, you're going to end up with some big problems.
Probably you're going to have a little bit more substantial problems than if people just have an upset tummy. That's probably true. But the point being, everybody just assumes that because there's a financial return that somehow there's some evil involved. And I'm just trying to make the point here that no matter whether you're making wind turbines or selling carrots, there's going to be a financial stimulus to get your problem solved. or else you're gonna go hungry yourself, you're not gonna get any bread.
Everything
Just
does have a
saying.
trade-off. It's true, everything does.
But anyway, I mean, we are trying to hear it, and again, I think in New Zealand, they're like at 40 decibels, but we're considering 35 decibels. So, again, probably the reason that we're going with 35 decibels, not 48 decibels, because New Zealand has a huge wind program. It's probably because of the Clifton Task Force on Wind, because otherwise, if you weren't in existence, we could say, oh, we're going to go with 40, because New Zealand goes with 40. They have a huge wind program, and so we don't need to worry about it. But you're here, so, you are being heard is the point that I'm trying to make. You might not get everything that you want out of it, but it's not like you're having no impact. And that's what I want to try to get across. I mean, you are having an impact, just maybe not as much as you would like to have. There's a balance. Go ahead, Jessica, because you've been here right along. I really appreciate how many times you've been here, believe me.
Just going back a few seconds ago when you were saying we have a stricter setback, a stricter sound limit than New Zealand, and that you're protecting us because the Clifton Task Force on Wind has raised their voices.
Right, it was good that you did.
But that standard is going to be hard to enforce, correct?
Well, I don't think it's going to be any harder to enforce than if it was 40.
Or just have the setback bigger.
But the setback is just a proxy for sound.
But it would protect people's property.
Well, let's just say that if, just academically here, okay, because I don't think it can be done, but let's just say that instead of the wind turbine starting out at 103 decibels like this particular one does, let's just say it started out 80 decibels. So by the time it got to your property line, there's no possible way it could be more than 25, and it would only be 1,000 feet away. Would that be okay?
That's a lot to take in right now. I'd like to see it on paper, but
But you know what I'm saying? I mean, because that's what you're telling me is that...
But you just mentioned the word property lines, and right now that is not in there.
Well, just say but you're telling me that the distance is more important than the sound.
I think the distance is easier to enforce than the sound.
Well, just because something is easy doesn't mean it's right.
Exactly.
Just because something's hard, don't mean
What's
Wrong,
the distance right now?
It varies based on a variety of things. It's like 4,000 feet for 35 decibels or 40 decibels, something like that. What is it like today? What?
After 4,000 feet, it right now is at 40 decibels.
4,000 feet is how long? I'm really dumb.
Just shy of a mile.
Yeah, 4/5 of a mile.
So
I'll
outside
yes,
of
I
a couple of
promise.
houses that you guys have talked about, where's the next closest house?
Over a mile, I believe.
5,000 feet, just under a mile.
Just under
Is
a
that
mile.
my house?
No. You're over a mile.
Over a mile?
So what happens if somebody buys the place that's
I'll call you. Are you guys done? Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. Thanks.
And you guys are talking about houses. I'm not talking about houses. I'm talking about people's property. That is just as much of a value to me as my house.
I believe, I have to go look at the drawings, but I believe at Peter Becker's back line, it's like around 32 decibels. I know, but I mean, you probably wouldn't know the difference of 32 decibels. It would be difficult to figure out what you're hearing at 32 decibels. So that's well under, I'll call you Trez. 30, I believe that's the number. At the back property line, it's at 3,200 feet, it's like 32 decibels, roughly. But I mean, so it's already well under what some places think is perfectly acceptable at a house, which we don't think, by the way.
I just don't want to have people's property as a sound buffer for a business.
Okay, well, what if we said it was 35 decibels at a property line, just out of curiosity?
I haven't gotten into that.
Well, I know, but see, that's, well, and I agree, I'm not gonna go with like what Paul was trying to beat me up on earlier. I understand, you have to look it up. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm not going to do
Thank
that. I didn't like that either, so I'm appreciative of that. Go ahead. Oh, Therese is next, I think.
Okay, you've got a limit that's set out at like 4,000 feet at a certain amount because people's homes and structures and properties are about there from wherever this wind turbine exists. What's going on closer than that? What happens if somebody decides to build a home there? Or does that then preclude the fact that we won't be building homes there because you can't meet the standards of livability within that area? I mean, how does that work for new development within that area?
Either there's mitigation waivers, some of the other land that we're talking about for this, in this one situation, is in tree growth tax law or marginally buildable due to terrain anyway, because the slopes are too steep.
So under no circumstances do you feel that people will actually develop that land, move into that land, and have to mitigate that at some point because
Well, I don't know about, I have to look at the actual contour map for
500
this
feet from
particular.
the turbines, how loud are they, you know?
Well, there's no, I don't think there's, I think the property line, you have to be at least double the turbine setback. I don't know, what's the closest property line on this particular project?
1,300 feet
Right, so the closest one on this one is 1,300 feet. Is that with or without mitigation?
without,
So there's a 1,300 distance on one without mitigation. But I think it's tree growth tax law and it's steep. So I don't think you could build on it anyway.
Ever?
Well, I'm not saying ever, because
Well, I mean,
obviously the technology
The tree
changes over
growth
time.
farm kind of things where the tree growth thing is, if I'm not mistaken, it's sort of like something you do with the state for a certain length of time? Or is that,
It's like a,
10 years.
is it,
It was a 10-year plan.
you have to have a 10-year management plan for it, but I mean, it's, you
so
have,
once you decide to change that as a property owner, because if you change land, you're not necessarily, I believe, obligated to follow the previous owner's whatever.
right, you gotta
So
pay
as
back
people-
taxes, you gotta,
So the question then is how, does that reduce the value of the property? Is there any compensation for any of that? Will there be questions about that from any future landowners? And I just got questions, because the planning board's supposed to plan. That's what I heard.
Paul had her hand up next.
So you're proposing to take woodchuck off the prohibited list.
I thought we already did that.
That's,
That was at the request
that's
of
part
the
of this,
Yeah, that was a request from the
That was a couple years ago, I thought.
That happened before
No.
the first one.
what?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I wish I had a copy of the first
I don't know.
ordinance
Well, it was
here.
the second, even that in the 2011, but that was a request of the landowner.
in 2011, we took,
Woodchuck off, I thought.
Yeah,
did we have much discussion about that?
I think it was a
I
vote
think
here
it
at
was
town hall.
right.
John Williams was
I
really
think
upset
I was
about it.
writing those
John Williams.
Yeah.
yeah, those changes, and I don't remember writing that in.
What's that?
He was gonna sue the town.
Yeah, he was gonna
Nobody
sue
asked
us and we
his
took it
permission to
off.
Put it in protection.
They,
He was, I believe, I don't remember the exact thing, Debbie's recalling, he said he was gonna sue us. I believe it came off in 2011, and that when we updated it, we went down to, from 40 to 35, that like, those like 3 or 4 or 5 changes that we made that year, those all happened at the same time.
I believe that the 2011 ordinance that's posted on your website has woodchuck listed under prohibited sites.
no,
It isn't on there.
Dave, can you bring it up?
What's the, what article is it in, Paula? I forget.
14.
Where am I looking for?
You're looking under the existing ordinances.
yeah,
So
so
go-
you gotta go back.
You're gonna go to,
Go to the home page, you can get it.
the Clifton Land Use Ordinances, Clifton Land Use Ordinances, click on that.
Way down.
Come down.
Way down.
Come down, keep coming, keep
Down
coming,
the bottom.
keep going, keep going, right there, up, right there.
Okay, where am I going? Article 14.
Article 14.
No, you have any idea where we're going?
See if you, can you do right mouse click and search on that somewhere?
It's,
Let's see.
Or find or something? No,
this is that damn
yeah,
Microsoft page.
yeah, no, I know.
Right at the top says search the document.
It's under,
Yeah, on the upper right,
Upper right, yeah,
Where?
A little
Down,
lower,
down,
little
down,
into the
just
left.
There you go.
There's some-
Right over. Oh, oh.
Nope, there you go.
Just type in woodchuck right there.
How much wood for them?
I think you just hit return, will do it.
There. Hit the eyeglass, the magnifying glass.
I don't hear Jeopardy music yet.
Well, this is just really a lot of fun.
Is it, you hit the little down arrow maybe?
Prohibited scenic resource. That-
It's highlighted, it's not,
Yeah. No, that's because it's the search
It
term.
brings it up.
The wind turbine shall be set over fire.
So it isn't now, so it didn't get taken out. I thought it had gotten removed.
I'm sure it can.
because I printed it off from there today and it said woodchuck.
Well, you're right. I could have
Is that the
sworn.
official one from the office?
Do you have your hard copy with you tonight?
You got your
No.
hard copy?
Well, Yeah, this has nothing to do with this.
No, I know. He was just upset because his property had been, identified.
Yeah. There's no turbine within 2,500 feet of it anyway.
I don't think so. I don't know.
No, there isn't, not even close.
Scenic resources.
4,000 feet even.
Is there a different place in here where it's identified in the entire ordinance?
Where else is it?
In another article?
G, okay, sorry.
Right, continue searching?
No. Are you sure if you want to? But I think that's the only time.
Yeah.
No, it is still in this one. I thought we had it taken out.
It was definitely at a town meeting. So maybe what you can do, Debbie, it would have been like a 2011 spring meeting.
Isn't the latest?
If you could go back and
I still have the copies.
well, I have the original copies of the old ordinance, but what I'm interested in is the vote
No, I
copy.
mean, I have the copy of the revisions, and I'm sure the town report has some in there too.
Right, well, she'll just have to go back and look and see if we voted on it or not, what the vote was.
There's a lot of articles.
Right.
Yeah.
She'll look it up and she'll get back to us with an answer, and it's good that you picked that up. I could have sworn it was taken out, but I could
So
be,
did I know John requested it, I thought he did.
yeah, I thought so too, but obviously it's sitting up there and we're wrong. But,
I know he made a big complaint about it, but I didn't think we changed it.
well, Debbie will go look it up for us. That was not part of quote unquote this ordinance change. We thought that had already been done. I think we're down to, you know what, actually I have Jared Trues here. To see if this is what he already said. Oh, okay, no, this hasn't been written yet. Okay, this is from Jared. Article 18 of the proposed land use ordinance defines scenic resources as meaning a scenic resource as named in the Clifton Comprehensive Plan. Peaked Mountain, Little Peaked Mountain, Parks Pond Bluff, Eagle Bluff. The Clifton Comprehensive Plan states under the heading Scenic Areas, the views from the top of Peaked Mountains, Parks Pond Bluff, Eagle Bluff, and Woodchuck Hill have for centuries attracted residents and visitors alike. These are scenic resources which are as valuable as our town's culture, as its forest industry, and the community character. Can you explain why the planning board chose to omit listing Woodchuck Hill in the Article 18 definition for a scenic resource, which we just talked about? We'll look into it. Article 18, which provides definitions relevant to the land use ordinance, lists the term noise, but does not provide a definition. Does the planning board not agree with the generally accepted definition of the word noise, i.e. unwanted sound? On March 20th, 2014, the planning board posted a response to articles linked on the information page of the CPB's website. This response from the planning board reads, many journals indicate more research is required. However, the growing body of evidence around the world suggests there is no physical reason why there should be issues with sound levels at 40 dBA and lower. Why then shouldn't Clifton's LUO allow sound levels to exceed 40 dBA under normal circumstances, i.e. the greater of L90A pre plus 5 or 35 dBA and the greater value of L90A pre plus 10 dBA or 40 dBA? Next question. Do the proposed revisions of the Clifton Land Use Ordinance differentiate a medical marijuana dispensary cultivation facility from a medical marijuana caregiver's cultivation facility? Given that the board states the board will not be taking on the issue of quarries between now and June, however, this and some other items asked by John Williams will be worked between June and the meeting next March, would it be wise for the planning board to consider a moratorium on such activities to provide a time frame for these issues to be addressed? According to the proposed land use ordinance, the sound produced by a small under 100 kW wind energy system as measured at the property line shall not exceed 5 dBA above the ambient sound levels, whereas an industrial wind energy facility is only limited to the greater of 5 dBA above ambient sound at a home or 35 dBA. The sound limit for an industrial wind energy facility at property lines is a 10 dBA increase over ambient. What is the planning board's rationale in making a stricter ordinance for residential scale windmills than for industrial wind energy facilities? So we'll answer those next week as well. I'll get the stuff scanned in and get it posted. So I have another one in here. Okay, she already read this.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to probably leave these with you, to be honest with you. Well, or I can just take them home and scan them and bring them back tomorrow, because I have to bring you Peter's hard copy too. Just so you know, we have a 100 megabyte limit, I think, on that website, and we're at like 66%. And if I get like a typewritten document, it only is like about between 75 and maybe 100K PDF. But when I have to scan these, it's like about 700 PDF, even when I scan it on the lowest setting. So anybody who can provide written documents, it takes up less space on the website than it does otherwise. But still, I have 44 megs left, so about that.
That comprehensive plan, that's already on your website, so you don't need to put that in.
Okay, thanks.
Eric, Bill has something.
Yeah, I'm just getting down to Bill. So Bill, you have.
Thank you. Before I begin, my name is Bill Rand. I got some comments that I'd just like to address and maybe ask a couple of people a couple of questions. First of all, I just got down on the planning board about 3 weeks ago. It was the end of my term. I've experienced a high level of frustration working with this ordinance changes, especially Article 14, and it's been like a little dance. The dance is that you get asked a question, but you got to really think through the question because it's not the answer they want to hear. It's really frustrating to be working through these parts because I'm not so sure that the task force really wants to make a safer ordinance, but an ordinance that does not allow wind turbines or a wind energy facility in the town of Clifton. I'm convinced of that. A couple of quick questions on comments that were made earlier. Paula, you said that the planning board all along has not vetted the ordinance, and we've rushed it, and I've been on the I was on the planning board for about 8 years. This board has been meeting since January, every week, sometimes 2 to 3 hours a week. 4 of the 5 members have full-time jobs, and look how far we've got. It would take ordinance would never get done I mean, you who you're retired yourself, did not have as much time as you put into it. You didn't have enough time. So we just did the best that we could under the circumstances that were granted us. And that's all you can hope for. Some things will slip through, some things will not work. That's why you have amendments after the fact. But I just think to myself how overwhelming it's been just to go through these individual articles, how we talk about, you get to an interesting article like Article 14, but how many nights did we sit going through definitions and page numbers after page numbers and just correcting that? So I want to bring that up. Jessica, I'm a little confused on what you brought up in your last comments about Judge Horton's comments. Do you feel that because Judge Horton said that there should be ISO contour maps, that that's what we should be striving to have in the ordinance?
Is this a public hearing for the ordinance?
Well, we kind of, yes, what we did, just to be kind of clear with Jessica about this, the original format is just people come up and talk and then we don't say anything. But because we don't really have a lot of speakers and because we're a small town and we really do want to be open, and I've actually I feel like tonight has been some good dialogue. I really appreciated, how it's going. As long as we can answer the questions calmly, but if she doesn't want to answer a question, she doesn't have to.
I think this has been the best meeting I've attended yet. I mean, I wish Jared was still here. There were some solid questions tonight. There was a lot of information that's come out. Good questions, good answers from the board. It's been well handled, but I'm just a little confused. I'm not asking you a loaded question, but I mean, we just had Mr. Wallace talk about why ISO contour maps can not happen. You can't have them. And then you brought up in your comments that because Judge Horton said that it was in the ordinance, and I don't think Judge Horton's a qualified sound engineer. So I'm just trying to get a little feedback from you.
And you don't have to answer, Jessica, if you don't want to.
Thank you for your opinion.
Okay, very good. And Paula, you also mentioned that when we're addressing all these changes and making wholesale changes to the ordinance, why didn't we just address the ISO contour map part and just make that one change, then going all through that? Well, if we had known that from the beginning, yes, that would have been an easy fix, but all we've heard from the task force is sound, sound, sound. But every time that we make an adjustment to the sound or answer your concerns, it's not enough. And so I want to just go into what I actually wrote now after that. All right. We all know the history of how the town is voted and how the planning board set out to create an ordinance that would be fair to all developers and at the same time protect the well-being of all the citizens in town. A group of citizens led by one family has fought this project from day one. The planning board has bent over backwards to accommodate them with all their concerns and even proposed to adjust the ordinance so that the sound level requirements drop to 35 dBA, 4,000 feet. Keep in mind that the planning board has never, in all the evidence presented to it, had any scientific evidence presented to us that sound would cause harmful effects from distances greater than 4,000 feet, which our ordinance covers. We've never had any data submitted to us that would indicate that there are potential issues, health issues beyond that. We have seen and studied a lot of evidence that sound from wind turbines might cause harmful effects at distances less than 2,800 feet. And to that end, I'm kind of bringing up Mars Hill. When Bruce and I made a trip up to Mars Hill, the thing that I realized, and this kind of goes earlier to what everybody was talking about, that the ambient wind is actually more often than not louder than the turbine noise. When Bruce and I got up there and we set up Bruce's sound monitoring equipment, it was a pretty, what would you say, 5 to 10 miles per hour that particular day, Bruce? Was the wind speed?
Probably around, yeah. Yeah, it was a little hard to tell. In some places it varied.
What overruled any sound from the turbines was the ambient wind itself, going through the trees, going through across the snowbanks. We couldn't hear the turbines. We went all the way around the mountain. We saw on the easterly side where the homes were closer than 2,800 feet. We didn't see any homes that were for sale. There were times when you could hear the turbines, but never consistently, constantly. And they were never annoying to us on that day that we went up there. Bruce has since discovered there's actually been a couple of homes that have actually gone under construction, or new homes, since the turbines have gone up, is less than, I don't know how close they were to the mountain, but you recall how close the new construction was?
I don't remember at this point, but it was under 3,000 feet. You can, if you do Google Earth and then use the timeline, you can see where houses have been built.
Okay. All the residents on the easterly side of Mars Hill, between the mountain range and Canada, have been mitigated now, and according to the town manager, everything's fine with these people. So, like I said, we were there. The most noise we heard at all at any given time when we were on that back road was a chainsaw that was running at a residence. Now we have a study in front of us, and this has only come up briefly tonight when it was shown on the monitor. We have a study from us from Beaver Ridge in Freedom, Maine that took place during from November until mid-December. I think it was the 19th of November to the 16th of December. This was done during the winter, leaf off, GE turbines, the loudest point. I believe there were like 5 residents, and one of the residents there actually requested that a sound monitor be put up on their property. I printed 61 pages off, and I'd be happy to give this to you, Paul, if you look at it, even though...
I looked at it today, I got it.
It's got narrative. It was done with turbines on, turbines off, all the protocols that were needed to be done for an accurate study, and it was backed by an independent, sound engineer that, in fact, it was David Hessler, and that looked at, confirmed the data. In fact, David Hessler requested some more strict protocols be put in place to do this sound study. So some of the results, and it's pretty easy for a layperson who goes on to look at this on this site at the sound levels at the different homes. The closest home is 1,300 feet away. At that distance, the average dBA, I believe, was 42.9 over that period. One home at 2,800 feet averaged 35.9, another at 2,800 feet averaged 37.4. The furthest home away was at 3,200 feet and averaged 29 dBA. I have the study available and would like to present it to the Task Force on Wind. It has become quite apparent that regardless of what the Planning Board does to mitigate the concerns of opponents to wind energy, their opposition is not going to change. To this end, these people are trying to ordinance out any wind energy facilities. You see, it's not the safety factor. They just want they just don't want a wind farm in Clifton. Eric kind of gave an extreme when he said if we could get to 35 dBA at property lines, would that satisfy the task force? Let's say if we could get to the state, what's it, 45 to the state?
42 now.
42. If we could get to 42 dBA at property lines, would that satisfy? Or is the goal really is to develop an ordinance that would not allow wind turbines? I wish someone could answer that question for me.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say something.
Can you just let him finish and then you can chat?
I'm not going to answer his question.
But you don't have to. That's what I told Jessica.
But I'd like to say something.
Let me finish then.
Just let him finish. Just
I
jot
thought
it
it was
down.
done. Okay.
Every time the Planning Board has addressed a concern of the opponents, they have simply moved the goalpost and raised new frivolous objections. Questions asked at meetings show that they have read little or none of the documents the Planning Board has placed on the website. When it became apparent that the Planning Board was not going to simply do as the vocal minority wished and ban wind turbines, they resorted to despicable personal attacks on members of the Select Board,